my name's Jessica. I am living and working in the UK at the moment for a company called New Day, where I have the title of Senior Principal Architect. Yes, I do understand that senior is redundant before principal, but tell that to my boss. And in my experience of working in tech, I have worked with a variety of different systems in a variety of different maturities and in a lot of different size companies, right from small startups through to working in government, which you can't get much bigger than that. And with these, some of them are brand new, sparkly, the teams love working on them, they've been very invested in them. But the majority, and the ones I enjoy working most with, are the ones with a lot of character. They might be a bit older, they might be written in a language that many people are familiar with. They might have a bit of history to them, let's put it that way. So today I want to talk about working with those systems and helping getting them into a state where they're stable and people enjoy working with them, most importantly. So this is very much my own process. So it's very much from my own experience, but we'll go through the 5 main stages I tend to look at, which is understanding, measuring, prioritizing, communicating, and most importantly, making mistakes and learning from them. So we'll start off, understandably, with how to understand. Now, understand is not just about the systems themselves, it's about the products that they're working for. And before we go into the understanding of the actual tech, I think the first thing I try to engage my teams in is a degree of empathy. So as I mentioned, I really like these systems because they surprise you at the last minute when you least want it. Keeps you on your toes. And often they're described as legacy. Legacy has become a bit of a dirty word in tech. No longer do you leave a legacy as you leave a company, but legacy is the piece of code that nobody wants to work on. It just sits in a corner, rots, and nobody talks about it and hopes it goes away. So instead, I like to refer to them as pre-loved. I had somebody in my team recently refer to it as vintage, which I also quite liked as well. But at some point, there was a team that worked on this system. They put effort into it. They loved it. They had some constraints. They may have had time constraints. Maybe the tech that was available to them wasn't the tech that we have now. But at some point, somebody put effort into the system. And you don't know. They might still be working in the company. And if you're going around going, oh, I hate this rude word, they're not going to appreciate it. And they're probably not going to say nice things about you either. So first is to get a degree of empathy for not only the code and system that you're working with, but the teams that came before. And this leads into the importance of language. Not only to, be kind, but also a shared language. English is very, very difficult. You have one word that means multiple things. Often they counteract each other. And the example I'm going to use here is pants. Now, in the UK, pants is your underwear. In the US, pants is your trousers. No pants, no service becomes a very interesting check, depending on how you're taking this. And that's just with a very simple thing. But when it comes to technology, we like to use every initialism and acronym we can. If it's got 2 Ds, it must be good. DDD, TDD, BDD. And then that's just the text. I mean, what about product or business people when they start bringing theirs in as well? Suddenly, you're all saying the same letters and meaning completely different things. And nobody knows what's going on. So again, one of the first things to do is to establish a ubiquitous or shared language. This can be through a glossary, it can be through, any forms you want, but making sure that everybody's saying the same words and understanding. And as part of this, whether you're working on a pre-loved system or something that's brand spanking new, please remember when you have junior developers or someone who's new to the company and you're using a bit of company-specific language to explain what you're meaning, because the amount of times I've gone into companies and they have said words and it has gone straight over my head. And often the most junior person in the room isn't going to be confident enough to go, what does that mean? So yeah, empathy all around. Now we get to the interesting bit. Understanding the domains. And because we just talked about language, I'm actually going to change this slide to understanding the product. This has come from a very recent learning that I've had, where I've been working with a company that is trying to get more product-led teams, having their defined domains, so going through all of the kind of domain-driven design practices. Great stuff. Turns out domain means nothing to product teams, and it means multiple different things across my different tech teams, which is great. Some teams refer to domains as a capability, some refer to them as a bound context. I know I'm using jargon, and I just said not to, I apologize. But instead of trying to talk about the billing domain or whatever it may be, talk about the product that the domain is working towards instead. Then your teams and your product owner are speaking the same language, but also your teams will understand why they're working on what they're working on. So a mistake I used to make, and occasionally fall into still, because I am human, is the very first time I got given 32 services and got told to understand them. I was a mid-level dev. They'd been handed over from a team in the US who unfortunately had been departed from the company, let's put it that way. So I had to try and figure out what was going on with these components. I tried to do the jigsaw puzzle without the picture in the box. So I was reading through the code, and I was going, okay, so this bit does this, and there's this bit, and going from the bottom up, which is much like getting a jigsaw puzzle from a charity shop and trying to put the pieces together. You have no idea if there's missing pieces, if there's pieces from a completely different puzzle. It's very, very difficult and very easy to make mistakes. When really you need the picture in the box, because that tells you what all these little pieces are building up towards, what they create, what is your end product, whether there are missing pieces, whether you have a completely different domain or system in your hand. So how do you get the picture for the puzzle box in talking about technology? You talk to people. Sorry. You talk to your users, you talk to your stakeholders, you talk to the product owners who have worked with these systems before, not only to say, hey, what is this thing, but also, how do you use it? Because the amount of times you'll find that they're using things that you thought were bugs is unbelievable. So you talk to your users, your stakeholders, you build up that picture, and then you slot the technical pieces into place to understand each part of the system and how it plays a part in the whole product. And as part of that conversation, you want to talk about their key performance indicators. What are the business measuring them on? How are they getting their paychecks? So for this product, is it the cost of which it's running that they care about? Is it the amount of users? Is it the uptime? What is it that they're being measured on? So then this comes in handy later when you need to show the value of the work you're doing with stabilizing the system. And there's a few handy techniques. I'm not going to go into depth with these because they're all talks in their own right. I think there's going to be a few talks throughout the next 2 days, which will hint into some of these, if not explain them further. And I'm going to give some resources at the end. But two things I like to do is capability mapping and event storming. Very high level why I use them. Capability mapping I use to help identify the domains, the bounded context, the products, so kind of the high level of what's going on. And then the event storming is the flows through them, both in terms of the tech and manual processes as well, so how it all fits together to actually make a full end-to-end process for that product. The next step is to measure. So you now have a great understanding of your system. Some of these might be happening in tandem. But the most important measure is, how do you know it's working? And there's a few different aspects that I'll look at this. Documentation, tests, observability, pipeline and process, and recent incidents. So documentation, depends how lucky you are when it comes to this. If you're really lucky, there'll be in-date documentation and runbooks and life's jolly, and all those conversations you just had with your products and stakeholders and users is already written down. Great. That has never once happened in my career. So have a look at documentation, see if it's out of date, see what's available, get an idea about it. The tests, again, can vary. It might be that they're beautifully written, and by reading the tests, it's a form of documentation that tells you exactly what the code is doing. has happened. But more likely than not, they might be failing when you run them. It might be a case that they're not really testing what you need them to test. And there's some work that you can assess in terms of maybe we need to do some refactoring here to get a better view on when our system is working, when it's not. I'm going to quickly skip to pipelines and process because one of the most important things is knowing if your system, your components can actually deploy. I've definitely worked in systems where they haven't been deployed for about 4 years. It's been half manual, half automated, and I've had to figure out, can we actually get this thing live if we make a change to it? So again, figuring out where the state is with your CI checks, your deployment pipelines, and whether there's any adjustments that need to be made initially there. Observability is a huge topic. I myself have done a few talks on it. We're talking about alerts, metrics, and logging. So alerts, have you got a whole load of alerts that are making a load of noise so your team no longer looks at them? They go into a Slack channel that's muted by everybody, and you don't actually know when things are broken. If that's the case, that might be quite an easy fix to decrease the amount of alerts that are going off and only showing the ones that are important. Logging. One of the places I managed to save quite a bit of money in a few companies because they just logged everything in every single environment, and it costs. So maybe there's some cleanliness there. But how can you actually see that your system is working? And the last one I'm going to go into a bit more depth, which is recent incidents, and incidents as a whole. Sorry. So incident response. Often with these systems, they might not be the healthiest. So you're going to have a lot of reactive work in your teams to try and keep them up. And with incident response, there's some really key metrics which will give you value that you can produce very early on in this process. So here are some of the things that I would look at. First of all, I'd see what the current process is. Hopefully documented, you never know. I'd meet the teams involved. It might be that there's a centralized incident team. It might be that there's something embedded within the teams, fantastic. But talk to them, get to know what their experience is of when something's exploding in the system, who's yelling at them, how can they actually address it? And then have a look at recent incidents. Now, I've said mean time, you might not have as much data to create a mean, but get an idea of how long it takes to detect that there's a problem with the system, how long it takes to respond to it, and how long it takes to resolve it. If they have postmortems, fantastic. So my definition of postmortem is the document that has a log of everything that happened in an incident, which can then be used for a root cause analysis. Sorry, just going to get a quick drink. And make a mess. And the root cause analysis is kind of what it says on the tin, but getting down to what has actually caused these problems. And also in your post-mortem, you'll have some key events which might have happened, so also what's caused those. And those two things can lead to preventative actions. Now, preventative actions is an interesting one because often you'll find that teams will have all of the above, and they'll go, yay, we know what happened. We know why the incident happened. Are we going to do anything to stop it? Oh, we've got other priorities, mate. We don't want to do that. Preventative actions are the key to stopping you having incidents. But for some reason, very difficult to get prioritized. So being able to actually address some of those and bring down that reactive work, fantastic. But we'll get into that a little bit more in a minute. This slide is a lot politer than it used to be. So I phrased it as listen to the teams. I used to call it create the poop list. I didn't use the word poop. Just get the teams that are working on the systems into a room with a bunch of Post-it notes, or if you're working remotely, a Miro board or whatever your tooling is, and let them vent. Let them tell you what they've really been wanting to fix, what problems they're having. Let them tell you what they actually like about the system, if there is anything. Let them get it all out of their chest. It's very cathartic. Honestly, it's not as depressing as it sounds. And then what I do after this exercise is I use some high-level categories to group them into. Now, this will come into my prioritization bit in a second. And honestly, I've just kind of made these up as I've gone on throughout the years. But security and compliance, I like to group those up because they often have timelines, SLAs, and a very clear amount of impact towards them. Commercial and feature, again, you know who your stakeholders are when you need to talk about impact and timelines. Maturity and debt, that's going to be most of your post-its if you're talking to your engineers. But that's where you need to be doing a bit of cleanup and refactoring. I'm an architect, so of course I've got to put the architectural pillars up there. But again, that will link into your business KPIs and whether you need to have a look at the resilience and reliability of your system as well. Business KPIs, are you making money? Pretty important. And then housekeeping I've got, because often it's not just to do with the tech and what we can do there, but it's also things like if you're an agile company, do they have definitions of done? Do they have definitions of ready? Are there ways of working helping them or actually hindering them overall? And this all helps towards the prioritization. So when I'm doing value analysis, I actually take on three things. These are often referred to with different terms, but have a look at urgency. So if there is a committed deadline, can it be negotiated? Has it gone by, long since forgotten? Impact, you've got risk, you've got legislative impact, often with finance tech, that comes into play. User experience, so is it having an impact to how people are using your product and their enjoyment of it? Business requirements, again, back to those KPIs, is it making money? Is it acting the way that the business want? But also effort. How complex is the work? Is it an easy fix or short fix? Is there many dependencies to manage? Try to factor that in when it comes to assessing the work. Probably seen this in a million different presentations, I apologize. But then you can prioritize into the do, plan, backlog, and eliminate. If something has very little impact, it's going to take a whole load of work. Nobody really wants it. Throw it into eliminate. Don't even think about it. Delete it. Get it off Jira. If it's high impact, but it's not hugely urgent, and you need to do a bit of planning around it, it's probably a good candidate for a backlog. If it's not urgent, not really high impact, but it's one of those little back pocket things for, well, when I was a developer, I liked having little one-pointers for when I was really fed up with my task that I could just get done and feel better about myself. They're quite nice to have in the backlog. Planning, if the effort's not high, but the urgency also isn't high, so it's high impact, but nobody's going to rush you on it. And then do is high impact, high urgency, so it needs to be done. There's an SLA that's been broken. It's huge impact because you're going to get penalized loads of money if you don't do it, or high impact and low effort. When you start with this work, there's going to be two kind of phases of work. So there'll be reactive coming into your team and proactive. Reactive is the things that are coming from incidents, the things that you're not planning, or that you have a wild stakeholder come out in a boom of smoke saying, I need this thing done in 3 days, and it's going to cost the company $500,000 if you don't do it. I do kind of see them as bad characters in a pantomime. And then proactive, which is the bits that you actually get to plan. Lovely. And at the very start, it's likely that you'll have a lot of reactive work because people don't really know the systems, the products they're working with, what's happening there, and quite a low amount of proactive work. Now, if you are addressing the work, you've prioritized it correctly, so you've actually managed to get those pieces of work for fixing the incidents in. You've managed to get your tests refactored. You managed to stabilize the system a bit more. That reactive percentage should come down. And the proactive planning percentage should come up, which looks great for anybody who's looking at your team. Because suddenly you have velocity. You know what your team's going to be doing. You can demonstrate that you have a plan. You know where this product is heading and why, which is very key into communication around this work. And I must apologize now. You probably came into this thinking it's going to be really techy. It turns out it's mostly people. Surprise. With this work, you want to show your workings. Not just kind of come out of the blue going, I fixed it, but show why you're making these plans, why you've prioritized certain things over other things, who you've identified as your stakeholders, what you've identified your product to be. So as part of this, you want to show what work has been planned, why you've prioritized that work over others, how you're going to achieve the plan, when do you expect to see a measurable impact. That's where these measures are very important, especially the KPIs. So for each piece of prioritized work, what's the result you expect to see out of it? How can people get updates on the work? You'll have a variety of audiences. So turning up at a weekly meeting when half the people are on holiday to tell people about your work probably isn't going to be enough. You'll be wanting to send out newsletters, emails. You'll be wanting to do videos. You want to be able to do show and tells in different formats for people to consume. And the very important bit, a plan B if it's not going to go as expected. Always have a backup plan. The important things with these plans is to keep them small, keep them iterative, because you want to be able to go, this is what I want to do, this is what I expect out of it, but if it goes wrong, it's okay, we'll do something else. And prioritizing when everything is urgent, which it always is really, really difficult. There's huge power in being able to let things burn. And what I mean by this is not just to go, well, I don't want to do that work, so it's not happening, go away. It's, these pieces of work are really important for these reasons. Therefore, we're not going to do these other bits. Not right now. We might do them eventually. But I know it's really important to you. It's not important to all these other people. And learning how to say no is hugely powerful, not only in these projects, but in work in general. And with all of this, consider your stakeholders, consider your audience. So you have stakeholders, both internal, you might have external clients. You do not want to be telling your external clients what you're telling the engineer in the desk next to you, certainly not in the same way. You've got your impacted teams, so teams that are doing the work, that are impacted by the work. Dependencies, you might have centralized security or infrastructure, but they need to know about the work and how you're planning it. Senior leadership, C-suite and exco, they're going to be wanting to know about how your changes affect their business. They don't want to care about each line of code. And your peers, so not the teams that are directly impacted and having to do the work, but those who are around you can learn from this experience. And they might be interested in what you're doing. They might be picking up some of the techniques that you're practicing throughout this. So keep it visible, and that keeps it safe. If you're always visible with the intentions of what you're doing, you will build a lot more respect for the work you're doing and for the teams involved. And this is where it's actually secretly a people talk. All of this is the magic to building trust. From my experience with a lot of these teams, I'll go in and their stakeholders, the C-suite will go, oh, this team, they never get anything done. They keep bolstering their estimates and they're a terrible team. Because they've said they'll do things and because of circumstances, most likely reacting to a load of incidents, they haven't been able to actually prioritize and do the work. And the teams don't trust the business a lot of the time because they know what needs to happen, but they've never been able to get the buy-in or the time. But throughout doing all of this, being clear with your communication, understanding the system, talking the same language, but most importantly, being able to do these little changes and show progress, you'll build trust between all of your stakeholders and your team itself, which hopefully will lead to a much happier team as a whole who want to work on the very charismatic system. And the most important bit about that is being able to make mistakes and do it in a very safe environment. As I mentioned at the beginning of this talk, I'm human. Most of this has come from mistakes I've made. I have felt the pain so you don't have to. And it goes the same for the teams, but it also goes the same as I walk in as an architect. I try to make some changes, and I make it clear that it's okay if we get it a bit wrong. We can change our plans, we can change what we're doing, and we can fix anything that we've done that might have caused a problem. At the end of the day, I'd much rather my team learns from their mistakes than is so scared about making mistakes that they don't want to deploy their code at all. Because the important thing is with this work, it's incredibly overwhelming. There's so much to it. And you go in often thinking, I will make all this better in the next 6 months. You won't. It'll take years. If you do, you will make things better. You won't fix it. You can't fix the world. And as soon as you realize that and you concentrate on what you can fix, your life is going to be so much less stressful. You won't have to work 12 hours a day. You can go home, play computer games, play with your dog, do what you want to do, and switch off from work. But knowing that you've made small impacts pretty much every week. I won't go for every day. That's a bit ambitious. But what you can do is you can help others as well as yourself. As I say, superpower, being able to say no, but in a way that sounds like you will eventually do it. You can help others by helping them focus on, don't look at the bigger problem. Don't look about how to make this the best product in the entire world overnight from going from this zombie put-together system. But instead, what can you do as an individual? What can you do as a team? What is the thing that, you managed to make the test suite go green? Celebrate it. You managed to get your incidents reduced by 10%. Celebrate it. Celebrate every single win, because otherwise you're going to feel like you're running a treadmill that never ends, and it gets exhausting, and you get burnt out. And it's really, really easy to burn out from this kind of work. And don't burn yourself out by saving others. So also stick to these rules yourself. Celebrate your own wins. Celebrate each small bit that you've done, and keep it visible to the business so that they know how fantastic you are because you've saved them. As I mentioned, there's a whole load of resources on this. This is a very high-level talk for what should be about 6 different talks in one. Ian Cooper is fantastic. If you want to learn a bit more about capability mapping and event storming, he's got some great talks around it. These are 3 books I have actually read. I know I probably should put the big DDD blue book on here. If I'm honest, I've never made my way through it. I get about halfway and I find something else to do. So instead, I read the red one, the Implementing Domain-Driven Design. It's shorter. It's got much of the same content. The Google SRE books, there's a whole suite of them now. Really, really valuable for ways of working. And the DevOps for Dummies book has not only some really nice ways of working, which I've applied to this talk, but it's actually a very enjoyable read. It's got some funny jokes in it. I know I ran through that very quickly, but I'm hoping there might be some questions. So thank you for your time. And if you do have questions, please ask. Oh, yay.
Did you say that you were working on code that hasn't been released in 4 years? Like it's in staging for...
So not anymore, thank goodness. This is going back to one of my previous jobs. Oh, there was a couple of situations. There was one where it had been released into production. It was written in Oracle that had gone out of date in like 2009. So it was well out of support, but it hadn't actually been deployed since 4 years ago. The funny thing was, there's a team of 3 people working on this, and they were actually doing work on it. They just weren't releasing it at all. And nobody kind of cottoned on because they were so afraid that when they did release it, it would just break everything. They just didn't tell anyone they weren't releasing. So yes, I have worked on systems which haven't been deployed in 4 years. I would not recommend it. Yeah. Oh, we did deploy it. It broke. Yeah. Yeah, shock horror. Any other questions? Okay, I'm going to assume you're shy and you have loads of questions. I've inspired you incredibly. So I will hang around after this talk if you want to come and approach me individually. I hope that there was some value in this today. If not, at least I hope you're entertained. And I will see you around the conference. Thank you so much for your time.